Productive Disruption is a podcast presented by Rhodes Branding, spotlighting bold and innovative ideas that have the ability to reshape K-12 education. If you're looking for actionable ideas about how to operate and innovate your school, you've come to the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome to a special edition of Productive Disruption, where we will celebrate CTE Month by diving into the world of career and technical education, one of the most dynamic and impactful areas of K-12. I'm your host, Dan Wyar, and I couldn't be more excited to have this discussion with three amazing leaders in this field. Each of them bring a wealth of experience and insights from school districts across the country. And today they are tackling some of the biggest challenges happening in career and technical education. Joining me today are Brida. He's the director of CTE and advanced coursework at Portland Public Schools in Oregon. We have Burgess, the director of secondary education, college and career readiness and CTE at Florence School District 3. And we have Melony Ritter, the CTE director at Cabarrus County Schools in North Carolina. We'll hear from each of them about how they got started in CTE, why they're passionate about this work. We'll explore business and industry partnerships, how to advocate for CTE at every level, and some of the strategies they're using to change some of the outdated perceptions of CTE in their district. And of course, we'll wrap up with a look ahead and what's on the horizon for CTE in 2025 and beyond. Just a quick tidbit, at Rhodes Branding, we are passionate about supporting CTE programs because we know the impact they have and how they can change lives. We believe that when students are given real-world learning opportunities and clear pathways to careers, their futures and their communities are stronger. That's really why these conversations today are so important to have. Why don't we go ahead and get started? Leon, I'd love to just kick things off with you. Maybe tell us a little bit about your journey into CTE. You know, what brought you into this work? What was maybe that kind of aha moment you had when you realized the power of CTE and that it was something you wanted to go into for a career?
Well, I think my journey into CTE was kind of strange. I started out as an English teacher and then went into administration, spent a number of years as administration at the high school level, then at middle school level. And one of the principals at the high school decided that he wanted me to come over to take over the CTE program. So he talked to me about it and I was kind of skeptical, but I decided, hey, it's an opportunity. So I took it because I really wanted to get back at the high school level and get away from middle schoolers, AKA hormones on legs. And so I took that opportunity, dove right back into high school. When I got into the CTE world, I quickly realized that it's probably where I belonged my entire career. I found that what I was able to see and what I was able to do and the impact of students was much greater. I was able to see more on a daily basis what just good engagement looked like for students. And I quickly realized that students involved in CTE, they were less likely to have the behavior problems that they did on the purely academic side, simply because they were engaged. And I think we all go through those ruts where sometimes we're wondering whether we should continue with it or is it time for me to hang it up? But I can honestly say my aha moments always come when I'm going through one of those periods. A student would usually pop up and come back to visit and say, hey, Mr. Burgess, you remember that time we did this? Or guess what I'm doing now? The students usually come back and they tell me where they are in life, and they always come back and attribute it to what happened in their CTE programs at Lake City High School. So that has always stuck with me. It's always resounded, and it keeps me excited about CTE and what it has to offer for students.
I love that. Melony, what about you?
So my story is a little unique in a sense of I went to college to be a teacher, but to be a CTE teacher. And I know that's not a traditional path for a lot of our CTE educators. And so my dad always told me when I was younger, you're going to be a teacher. And sure enough, I went to college. I got my bachelor's in business administration and a minor in education, and just fell in love with student teaching and, helping students kind of find their path. And I started in New York and now I'm in North Carolina. And, as a new teacher, it's scary. Y'all know it's very scary. You're trying to get your bearings. And even if you go to college to be a teacher, those first few years are very trying. And I think my aha moment honestly came, I was an FBLA advisor and I co-advised some DECA things, and just seeing the students really take the skills they were learning in the classroom and extend that into the current technical student organizations was so eye-opening to see these young people act so professional and act like they were adults. They were competitive. And some of the competitions are scary and difficult. Public speaking, these young people get in front of large crowds and they just take control of the room and, own it. So I think that was probably my eye-opening, probably one of the biggest impacts in my career.
It's awesome. Chris, what about you?
I have a non-traditional route into education. I went to business school, and like my sort of career prospects were to sort of work in the financial services industry, but I wasn't super interested in the cube life. So I became alternatively certified and became a math educator in Baltimore, Maryland. And so through that, I started in what I would call sort of lowercase CTE, not sort of formalized career and technical education, like recognized program, but I started teaching financial literacy and business concepts in my math class that then sort of evolved into me teaching a business course to students, which that was sort of the beginning of my sort of foray into this space. I left the classroom to become a high school administrator, moved across the country to Portland, Oregon, which is where I am now, and was a high school vice principal for 4 years, responsible for sort of growing CTE programs in the school that I was at, which I did from 4 to 8 in the time that I was there. And so that experience was the beginning of my sort of really understanding the value of career and technical education in a very sort of localized manner at a single high school. And then this position opened up at the district level, which was the director of CTE, AP, and IB. I was at an IB high school, was an AP student and taught at an AP school in Baltimore, and obviously had the CTE background. So it was a perfect blend of sort of those three things. The biggest part of my job in this role is CTE. We have a large CTE program in our district. And so it in many ways has come full circle to me. I'm in this sort of now position where all of the business skills that I gained while sort of in that part of my academic journey are sort of coming out in real life, because there is a lot of business involved with thinking about how to run an organization that, sort of nurtures 79 CTE programs. And the sort of relationships necessary with industry partners and things like that. So in many ways, like, this job has become the perfect balance of sort of my academic journey so far. My aha moments are, sort of the same as everyone else's. Is always when I'm in classrooms. We all know that cell phones are a problem, but they're never a problem in CTE classrooms. I step foot into a construction classroom or a manufacturing classroom, and those students are engaged in the work. And so, in many ways, like, the aha moment comes from the sort of power that CTE programs have in terms of, engaging students, both in sort of technical work, but also in academic work.
Well, Chris, you kind of hit on it towards the end of your intro, but like, we all know the importance of business and industry partnership, and know this is something you're really honed in on in Portland. I know you're also doing some things with your doctorate related to this too, I guess. How have you incorporated local industry leaders into what you're doing in Portland, whether that's through advisory position, councils, or just aligning what you're doing with general workforce needs? Like, how is that working for you out in Portland?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So this is sort of an area of focus for me, both from an academic background and now sort of professionally. I'm in a very unique position to be in a doctorate program with the focus of my dissertation being on the role and influence of external partners in this space, while also sort of having a sandbox in which to test research out to see how it sort of works. And so really what I am interested in and what our team is interested in is relationships with partners beyond just industry. Industry plays obviously a critical role in career and technical education because we're trying to sort of align the work that our CTE classes are doing with industry. But at the same time, there's also a critical role for our post-secondary partners in ensuring that the 3 or 4 year pathways that we offer in our high schools are aligned with the first year that students would get should they choose the sort of technical college route or the 4 year college route. We're also really interested in the role that our sort of nonprofit community partners play in this space. And instead of sort of asking them to do this culturally specific work at scale across the whole district, we're really interested in how can they help support keeping students, especially historically underserved students, on pathways towards high wage, high demand jobs. We're also thinking about the role of sort of government in this, like the Department of Labor and Industry, like what sort of policies come from government that affect the way that we sort of operate in CTE. So in many ways, we're thinking about sort of those four kinds of partnerships, and we think about them very differently. And then we think about the sort of role of partners at the central office level being a little bit different than the role of partners at the school level. At the school level, we're sort of looking for the relationships with partners that can be guest speakers and provide job shadow opportunities and internship opportunities. But as we think about the role of industry partners as part of this sort of workforce development at the central office level, we're really looking to build a system that moves CTE away from being an elective, which is sort of the way that it's been talked about for a long time, and move it towards being the beginning of workforce development. So our relationship with partners, sort of in my role, is more about the like, are there projects that partners can develop for our CTE classes that have mutual benefits for the partner? Are there sort of relationships that they can have across an entire career cluster that ensure that what we're teaching is closely aligned with the work that they're doing? So we're really trying to reimagine the partnership model here, so it's less one way, like where the district is the recipients of all of the things that a partner gives, and really sort of position ourselves as being a partner in return.
That's awesome. Yeah, so many of my conversations with your peers across the country have been around just aligning what's happening in 2025 in business and industry with what's being taught and preached in the classroom. I guess Leon, how does this translate to the work you're doing at Florence 3? I know you've got several different pathways and several different business partnerships that hit on this as well.
Yes, in Florence 3, we also are trying to make sure that we engage as many of our stakeholders as possible. We try to make sure that we reach out to the business and industry to see exactly what it is they need. And then sometimes we try to work with them closely enough to actually design a program based upon their needs. We're also making sure that we communicate with our post-secondary partners, which would include our local technical colleges and our four-year universities. And we're making sure that once we find out exactly what the needs are from the business and industry, that we then work with them to create that need or to fill that gap that sometimes they are expressing that they have. We also want to make sure that we engage as many people as possible. And we look to our local community to provide a lot of work-based learning opportunities for our students. And what we tend to find through that is that the businesses, they often find that they are not fully aware of what is actually happening in our career and technical education centers. A lot of times they say, I didn't even know that was going on there. And we've taken on that goal of trying to make sure that CTE is no longer the best kept secret. We want to make sure that everyone in the community knows, every business and industry that comes into the area knows what we're doing. And then we're trying to make sure that we build those bridges. For a long time, there was a negative connotation with the CTE. And so we're making sure that we break those barriers, that we open those doors, and that we are producing the students that our society needs.
That's great. And I'm curious, Melanie, with you, like just being right outside of Charlotte, and obviously we've all seen the growth of that city over the last, decade plus. I guess how is that translated to, what y'all are doing at Cabarrus and some of those business partnerships and opportunities you're providing to students?
It's interesting that you mentioned Charlotte. In Cabarrus County, we actually have very active partners, and it's directly within our community. So we do have some partners outside, Charlotte and some of the surrounding counties, but we really are a thriving county in Cabarrus. And healthcare is a huge industry for us. We've been very fortunate to have the healthcare industry as a partner. Sometimes it's hard to place students in different work-based learning opportunities based on their age, based on HIPAA. And we've really been able to do some great activities for our students in relation to work-based learning. I do think that we have challenges, but like I said, our community has been very supportive. We have 8 career academies right now. Each of those academies have advisory boards. And we've been working a lot with Rhodes to highlight our academy, which is all the different academies for recruitment. And each of the advisory boards actually have a smaller partner group, and it's directly aligned to the different industries. So, for example, our engineering academy, that's probably one of our strongest advisory boards. They're in the schools working with students. They help students understand the post-secondary alignment. So what am I doing in the classroom? How is that going to translate into, the 3 E's? So just depending on which partner, you're looking for help to connect with the students, we really are fortunate where we're at.
That's awesome. I guess to piggyback on that, Melanie, how have you seen, some of those business partnerships, flourish in terms of, those partners becoming, big advocates for what you're doing at Cabarrus and just kind of spreading the word to, their colleagues and friends that are, in other industries, other businesses around your county? Like, how have you seen that come into fruition?
Yes, I will say consistency is key. So continually getting them into our schools, continuously having students go into, the organization to take a tour. Once the partners really see where the value is, the give and take or the trade-off, they're asking, what can we do to help you? How can we support your students? Hey, I talked to my boss and I have an internship. Do you have any student who is, well versed in Adobe design, just as an example? So I think that it's a slow roll sometimes, and just being very consistent. Once it catches like rapid fire, you have to be ready though, because they start to come and start to offer different things. One of the things that we did struggle with was flying our banner, if you will, kind of telling our story. And partners, they would come to the table, but then they're not really sure how they impact students, right? I'm on an advisory board, but what can I do? And so being a catalyst for that was really important for Cabarrus County, being able to help a partner understand the smallest the smallest thing, come and be a guest speaker. That starts it. They start to build relationships with our students. Our advisory boards have been very consistent over the last few years. So the students from ninth grade see those same adults investing in them. And so that starts to build that relationship. And we end up, students are asking adults, what is your industry like? What is a day like when you go to work every day? And kind of building interest there too.
That's awesome. Chris, I'm curious, like, just given the size of your district and some of those, key business partnerships you've mentioned, like how have you seen that advocacy piece come into play with what you do? Just, given all the different, types of businesses you're working with on a daily basis in Portland. Like, do you get a sense that they understand what you guys are doing and how they can be an advocate, whether it's through policy or otherwise, to really promote what the district is doing?
Yeah, I would say it's sort of emerging, I think is the safest way to put it. Oregon is in a unique position. It's one of 3 states in the country that doesn't have legislative backbone funding for CTE. So the funding that we receive is really sort of like up to each district, how much money goes towards career and technical education. And so really, we see external partners as kind of the leverage point to move the needle in that direction. So we're really thinking about how do we sort of stack the resources that we have towards building the relationships with industry and building a coalition of the willing outside of the system. Because in many ways, that's what's gonna move the state. That's what's gonna move our districts. That sort of how do we move the needle, and sort of to everyone's point here, like CTE shouldn't be this secret anymore. Like it is in many ways the beginning of a workforce development solution that so many industries, especially in the Portland metro area, need. Like they're looking for employees to fill some middle skill jobs, especially where they don't need students to have college degrees. They need students who have highly technical skills in lots of areas like advanced manufacturing, construction, and things like that. So our sort of focus and approach has been in many ways like telling the good story of the work that we're doing. And, we just launched a big first time ever marketing campaign during this month, CTE Month, with the help of Rhodes. Shout out to Rhodes. To really start to change the conversation, because I think the conversation for a long time has been like a student's academic experience is driven by their core academics, their math, their science, their English, or social studies, whereas CTE is all of those things plus. It is math, it is science, it is social studies, it is sort of language arts. At the same time, it is the technical skills that students need to do things like welding or what have you, or high level computer science skills. And so in many ways, we're really trying to retell the story about what the value of career and technical education is in our region. And I think slowly but surely over the last 6 to 8 months, we're starting to get a lot more partners on board to really understand what this looks like and where the value is going to come, especially from such a large school district in such a large metro area.
For sure. And I guess on the flip side of that, Leon, like your district is kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum and the opposite side of the country. I mean, you're in Lake City, South Carolina. It's a smaller rural district. I guess how have all the strides you've made in CTE over the last several years, like how have you seen that come into play in terms of both internally, your colleagues in those other leadership positions being advocates for CTE? Like, are you starting to see a noticeable change in that just, in their conversations with business leaders and with people in the community?
I do believe I'm beginning to see a change with that. And you're right. In Lake City, the population is about 6,000 people here in Lake City. In my district, we serve K through 12, a little under 3,000 students. So that means we're in a very small rural area. And sometimes we have the challenges of trying to compete with larger metropolitan areas, right down the road. But I think what's happening here is because of the conversations that we've been having in our CTE department, and because we now make a concentrated effort to include the guidance counselors in what we're doing with CTE, as well as other faculty and staff members in educating them about CTE, the conversations are beginning to change and the perceptions are also beginning to change. We realize that a number of our students, probably 80% of our students, are going to be those students who go straight into the workforce. So we realize that right there in the secondary arena, we have a gold mine. We're able to, produce those students that people are going to be reaching for once they walk across that stage. And one of the things that we've done that's helped to change that narrative is we have begun to engage students at an earlier age. We have implemented, hands-on CTE programs at the middle school level. And then we have also made sure that even at the elementary level, they get some exposure to CTE through career explorations. So through those conversations, and because the parents now have students who come home talking about what they've done, it has begun to change the narrative and it's helped us in the community. What a lot of people were missing, I guess, in their perceptions of CTE is that CTE makes everything that you're doing in the core academic subject areas relevant. We've all sat in that class where we wondered, when am I ever going to use this? And I always joke when I ask that question because I say, I still know a Pythagorean theorem, but I've never used it my entire life other than memorizing it when I had to when I was taking trigonometry. But students, when they're sitting there in that English class, that math class, and they come over to build a construction and they realize that now that I got to cut a circle, I do need to know that math formula and I got to know how it works to plug those numbers in. So all that stuff comes full circle. And then as the students get excited, the excitement spreads to their parents who are parts of the community, who are parts of the business and industries that are going on. And so it has really helped to change that narrative. And I will also say the work that Rhodes has helped us to do with commercials and putting that out there has helped as well, because now we're getting more hits to the website and we're actually seeing the benefits of that.
That's exciting to hear. Appreciate the shout out from y'all on that. I guess Leon, you kind of hit on it. Just the lingering sort of outdated perception that maybe existed a little bit previously, maybe both internally and externally. Internally, maybe with counselors, and then externally, obviously with families and maybe business partners. I guess if there was one outdated stereotype or myth about CTE that you could erase, like what would it be and why?
I would gladly tackle the one about CTE being for students who can't do anything else or students who do not plan to go to college. What most people do not realize is that CTE teaches students these highly technical skills, and it's not the same as the vocational centers that people would think about back in, let's say, the 1980s. These students, they are learning very highly technical skills that will allow them to participate in high demand jobs. And these jobs have a very high retention rate as well. So if I could tackle that whole myth and get people to realize that that perception is outdated, it is incorrect, it no longer applies to what we're doing today, I think that we would very well be on track to making sure that CTE became, I would guess, the most important form of education.
I love that. Amen. Melanie, what about you? If you had a magic wand and could erase a myth with your magic wand, what would you do?
I will echo that. If I had a magic wand, I definitely would try to erase the myth that CTE is not for everyone. Um, we work really closely to build career development plans for our students. Starting as young as kindergarten, we do a lot with play-based learning in our district, all the way up through 12th grade. And at the end of the day, everybody's going to have a career. The path to get there might look a little bit different, but the goal really is after they leave high school, what's next? And I preach all the time. It is about what's next, and everybody needs to be involved in these young people's lives in order to help them realize their goals. It's my job. It's the English teacher's job. It's the math teacher's job. Administrators in the building, every adult in our community. It really is our job to help the next generation figure out what they love. I tell my kids, I have 2 girls in high school. They are in CTE classes, so I'm a very proud mom. But I tell them all the time, find something that you love and make that your passion. Continue to build goals surrounding what you want to do with your life. And if you love what you do every day, it's not work.
I love that. Chris, what about you?
Yeah, I think in many ways, to echo sort of both what Melody and Leon said, like this is a space that is for everyone. And what I think is the sort of maybe the myth is that like industry looks a lot different now than it did when we called this folk tech. When we talk about manufacturing, we're not necessarily always just talking about like welding and metalworking. We're talking about, especially in Portland and the state of Oregon, is the semiconductor industry, which is the chips that are in computers. 15% of the world's semiconductor workforce is in the state of Oregon. Intel is a major employer here. And so manufacturing is now like in a very clean lab, wearing a bunny suit, like highly refined manufacturing. It isn't like the manufacturing of vocational education anymore. The construction industry is changing incredibly fast. We're 3D printing homes, right? Like the world of work is changing so rapidly. And so in many ways, CTE is the part of the education system that is most poised to pivot fastest to what the world is going to need in terms of the sort of workforce needs that, industry is going to face. And so in many ways, like we're trying to move away from the perception that like it is sort of these old school skills, this shop class, home ec version of career and technical education, to these sort of highly refined, very technical skills and future careers. And in many ways, that is sort of the goal here. Like it is our job to ensure that students have access to high wage, high demand jobs. And the high wage, high demand jobs are in sort of spaces that did not exist when the vocational tech version of career and technical education sort of started. And that is going to continue to happen. There are going to be new jobs that don't exist now that our students are going to need to be ready for. And so we need to continue to sort of evolve with that.
That's a really great point. And, as we think about, Chris, like the emergence of AI and automation, within a variety of different industries, I guess, what's one change that you think will like maybe have the biggest impact on CTE over the next year or several years? Like is it AI? Is it something else? Like I'm just curious what you see.
Yeah, I think AI certainly is an area of interest and focus for us. I think school districts are in this really sort of interesting place in that in many ways they're trying to develop sort of reactive AI policies to the things that they don't want to see, right? Like we don't want students to plagiarize using AI, so our policies sort of reflect that. Whereas CTE is sort of at the other end of that spectrum, is like this is going to be a valuable skill for students to have in the future, and knowing how to use it correctly, like that's the version of AI that we're trying to build. So in many ways, we're sort of like playing this game of balancing what sort of the challenges of a quickly emerging and very quickly changing technology with the we know that this very quickly emerging technology is going to change the future of work. And so we need to make sure that we're preparing students for what that future of work looks like by equipping them with the right skills and tools. And that's the same that's how we view all of career and technical education, right? We've spoken so much through this call about, these highly technical skills. Well, AI usage is going to become a highly technical skill in many ways. Like there are technical skills that are more hands-on, and there are technical skills that are more technological or communications based or whatever it is. And so in many ways, like we just like I said before, are just going to continue to need to evolve with what industry is going to need in the future, so that we're setting our students up for success.
100%. Yeah, and I guess Melony, to same question to you. Like, what do you think districts need to do now to stay ahead of the curve? Like, what are some changes that you're seeing that'll have the biggest impact on CTE this year and beyond?
I think that using innovative strategies really needs to come to the forefront. Of course, AI, putting policies in place. But to Chris's point, we need to embrace it. We need to help our teachers, our students, administrators potentially understand how to use it to benefit the learning. There's a lot of ways that you can use AI to benefit a student's learning versus you can't, you can't, you can't. So I think that's really important. And then just like with any industry, there's ebb and flow. And if an industry, for lack of a better way to say it, is dying, they've got to figure out a way to rebrand themselves. And we as educators have to continuously do that as well. Really trying to keep our spaces up to the same industry standard that are potentially at a community college level, or again, back to the partnerships, partnering and making those asks, like how do we set up labs that are directly correlated to what the industry partners lab looks like, so that the transition of a student and their skills from high school directly into industry is much more seamless. We do have a lot of our partners tell us the students are not coming in with durable skills, or they need to be able to come in, and we don't want to train them on one software. We want to train them on how to learn all of the softwares. So it's just a shift. We have to continuously be innovative as educators and continue to meet the needs of our stakeholders.
Yeah. And Leon, I guess kind of the same question to you. Like, what are you kind of seeing in terms of whether it's to the point about AI or just emerging trends in CTE? Like, how have you guys adapted to some of those newer technologies and innovations? And I guess what do you see kind of moving forward in Florence 3?
I think much like my colleagues, I do believe that AI is one of the big trends that we're seeing right now. But I also believe that what most people have to realize is they have maybe he branded it perfectly a reactive approach to AI, and they're looking at what we need to do to keep certain things out of place, but we need to embrace it. And we probably need to make sure that everyone realizes that it's not that AI is going to come along and take people's jobs, but AI, those people who know how to properly use AI are going to be the ones who flourish in the jobs. Those are going to be the leaders. Those are going to be the ones who are able to make those changes. And those are going to be the ones who end up being the most successful, the ones who properly know how to use AI. So we definitely have to embrace it. I also believe that what we have to do in education is go back to one of our old sayings. And I used to hate hearing it, but I'm sure my colleagues can agree. At one time, it was always monitor and adjust. We've got to make sure that we're able to monitor what is going on and that we're able to adjust adequately. And that means that sometimes we've got to change our way of thinking. We've got to be more innovative, thinking outside of the box. That doesn't mean that we just go with everything that comes along, but we've also got to make sure that when we're in a situation like you are right now, where there are so many good things going on, we've got to realize how to look at all those good things and pick the actual best things to focus on and the best ways to gear our students and to kind of guide them into what we want them to be, into what, more importantly, what they want to be. I think that as an educational society, we've got to make sure that, and I'm borrowing something from Mark Perner, we've got to make sure that education does not march towards irrelevance. And so that means that making sure everything that we're doing is connected and that we're able to see exactly how it's going to be used, that we're able to make those changes, make those shifts, and move forward in society.
So true. Well, I really appreciate y'all taking the time. I guess, Liam, let's start with you on this last question. You kind of hit on it at the end there. What would be one piece of advice you would have for a CTE leader who's looking to elevate their programs this year? You know, they're obviously we're coming towards the end of this school year, and we're going into planning mode for next school year. I guess what's one piece of advice you would have for one of your peers out there who's looking to make a seismic change in what they're doing in CTE?
I would say if they want to make a seismic change, first of all, they have to tell their stories, but they also have to embrace change. And with that embracing of change, that means they've got to look for those things that are going to give them the biggest bang for their buck, those things that are going to, I guess, cultivate the best or the most well-rounded student. And we all know that CTE does that because, once again, it makes everything else that the student is studying relevant. And so I think CTE leaders and directors have to focus on relevancy. They have to focus on telling their stories no longer being a secret or letting it be a secret. They've got to get it all out there. And I think that as they do those things, they're going to see doors open and opportunities open that they probably would not have noticed in the past.
That's great. Melanie, what about you? What's one piece of advice you would have for one of your peers who's looking to elevate their CTE program this year?
I think one piece of advice would be that the culture and landscape is always shifting for us in education, especially within CTE. Yes, we need to, keep up on the state of the art. How do we make the connections, different things like that. But we're really in a situation now where we need to create personalized training and education for each of our students. The content might be the same, but the way that the students engage looks different for each student that we teach. And I think it's really important. I'm a huge advocate of instructional coaching and working with teachers to help them realize success and get better at what they do every day. And we need to kind of extend that for our students as well, and make it applicable. Why am I doing this project? I'm not just doing it to get an A. I'm learning these skills, and it doesn't look the same for every student. If we can figure out what our students are truly passionate about, they are going to take the learning and run with it. And as educators, we're just along for the ride at that point.
Yeah, one thing we say a lot here at Rhodes is get kids excited about running to school and not away from it. And CTE, I feel like has the best chance of that out of anything that happens within a school district. So those are all great answers, Chris. I guess I'm curious with you. What's one piece of advice you would give to one of your peers?
Yeah, I think the thing that I love most about this job is the sort of requirement or the ability that we have to boundary span into these very different spaces. Like it is important for a CT leader to understand industry and how industry operates and what industry's needs are going to be. And it is important for a CT leader to understand the post-secondary landscape and what the requirements are going to be for students to enter the technical college system or the four-year college system, and then how that sort of backs up to what the high school system looks like. It's important to sort of keep a pulse on the legislative agenda that's happening at the state level that's going to ultimately trickle down to CTE programs. And then same, like really understanding the landscape of the sort of nonprofit culturally specific partners and their sort of role in economic development for their communities. And so the sort of beautiful thing about this job is that it isn't something that just lives in K-12 education, which is fundamentally sort of how many jobs live, right? In underneath this umbrella, like this is a K-12 job. But our job is very much sort of in these wildly different spaces. And so having a pulse on all of those spaces is important. And then I think the piece of advice that I think is most important is how to leverage all of those relationships and understanding how each of those spaces works and bring those people together. It's about really finding ways to build meaningful cross-functional teams that are from industry, that are from post-secondary, that are from government, that are from our community partners to tackle some of the problems of practice that we have in career and technical education. This isn't just, and doing CTE well is not just a K-12 problem, it's a universal problem. Industry needs our support in workforce development, communities need our support in terms of economic mobility, colleges need our support because they need students to be prepared. Like we just sort of touch so many spaces in the broader ecosystem of education that I think having a pulse on all of those and then how to get those all to work together is the best piece of advice I could give.
That's so true, and that's a great place to leave it. So, Chris, Leon, Melony, I really appreciate you sharing your insights, your experiences, obviously your passion for CTE. It's clear, obviously, that CTE is not just preparing students for the workforce. It's really shaping the future of our communities and the economy as a whole. For anyone listening to today's conversation, if you can connect with our guests through their school districts, through LinkedIn, through just about every social media platform, and hopefully you found today's discussion valuable. And if you did, be sure to subscribe, share this episode, stay tuned for more stuff throughout the year from us at Rhodes. We really appreciate it. And thank you again to our panel. Thanks again for joining us for this special CTE Month episode. And until next time, we will see you again soon. So thank you, guys.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you.